Hello, and welcome to the course. I'm your host today, Stephen, and I'm speaking with Professor Yoonsun Choi of the Crown Family School of Social Work, Policy, and Practice. Professor Choi chairs the doctoral program at the Crown School and won the school's Award for Excellence in Doctoral Student Mentoring in 2018. She's also affiliated with the Center for East Asian Studies and the Center for the Study of Race, Politics, and Culture. She's here to talk to us today about her career path and how she became a University of Chicago professor. Welcome to the course, Professor Choi. Thank you so much for joining us on the course today. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for joining us despite your power being out.
I know.
Hope it comes back
Of
as
course, the electric company has to work on this very date.
Yeah, I know. Thanks for braving that inconvenience and talking with us anyway. So, lots to cover here, but first, just want to get a quick overview of what you currently do. So, yeah, could you just tell us what you do at the university and sort of in layman's terms describe to us what your research interests are?
So I'm professor at the Crown Family School of Social Work, Policy, and Practice of the University of Chicago. I'm also currently chairing or directing the doctoral program at the school. And my research is on Asian American youth and it's the young people. So I've been following, my current work is I've been following about 800 families, about half of them Filipino Americans and the other half about Korean Americans. So I've been following them since 2014, so it's been a while. And I have collected the data like 4 times over the years just to see how they're faring over the years. So I started when there were the participants were about 15 years old on average, but like ranges from 12 to 17 years old. And they're all in the young adults now. So we've been following them and their parents. And I'm mostly interested in how, say, what's happening in the family and also what's happening outside of the family or helping or not helping their development. And especially, I became really interested in these families after working as a social worker with immigrant families. And, that they range a whole lot of different Asian Americans and Latinx communities. And I just become really interested in how much parents were struggling with their adolescents who are growing up American in this country, and many of the parents were immigrants. So I became interested in, I just didn't feel like I had enough information to guide them. And that's what motivated me to study. And so I've been pretty, successful in getting the money because it takes a lot of funding to follow that large size of the family over the years. So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, I certainly am going to have more questions about that research, but
Right?
just to establish some of the basics here, could you please just quickly take us through, just the course of your career in broad strokes in terms of like, what institutions you've been a part of and where you've been, starting in college and undergrad and yeah, going up through the present day.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Korea. I went to Ewha University. That's all women university, actually. I studied English and education. And I actually decided to study English back then because I was motivated to leave the country and see the world, so to speak.
Hmm.
Um, so that's what I wanted to do. And back then, I wanted to study history and archaeology, but things have changed over the years, and it didn't work out at certain times. And after all, I decided to study social issues and what we can do about it. And I ran into this discipline called social work. That was sort of something new. To be honest with you, I ran into it in a Barron's, the college guidance as part of the discipline. I really wasn't sure what it was.
Hmm.
When I read it, it sounded really exciting. So I decided to pursue a graduate degree and graduate school. So I went to University of Texas, Austin School of Social Work. And at least the description was the social work is really sort of the way to engage politics and, sociology, psychology, public policy, all that really to improve the lives of people. So that really intrigued me. And also the fact that it's a profession. So I came to the States, got a degree. While I was working on it, So initially it was more the academic interest, but as I was studying, I'm like, wow, this is a real profession. And without really working as the profession, I will not be able to really know what to do with it. So I decided to work. So as a social worker. So I went and got a job in Los Angeles as a community worker at first, and then as a psychiatric social worker. And those times I worked primarily with immigrant communities and families. And I moved up to Seattle, Washington, at first for my husband, but I there too worked as a foster care worker for 2 years. And then I thought it's about time. I wanted to go back to school. So I got my PhD in social work from the University of Washington. And there I sort of, I think I mentioned earlier that my work with immigrant families really was sort of the motivator for my area of current research. So when I started the grad school, I mean, for doctorate degree, I knew that's what I wanted to study, but quickly sort of started delving into how race, immigration, and culture sort of influence youth development. And that's what I've been doing. And I was very fortunate to get a faculty position soon after I finished my PhD. So I've been here at U of Chicago ever since. But this is my 22nd year.
Wow. All right. Very cool. Well, yeah. So I'm curious. You were out doing social work professionally for a while before deciding to get a PhD in it. What was what was the main factor that made you decide to go back to school and approach this from the academic side?
So, I mean, it's sort of the mixture of sort of the back and forth. I mean, as I said, I came to the States with the more the academic, sort of the interest and motivation. But as I was doing it, I thought I need to really get my feet wet, so to speak, and have the
Mhm.
field experience. So I went out, and then if I liked it, I think I would have just continued. I loved the I loved working as a social worker, although it was really challenging, and I got to tell you, like extremely stressful. You feel like the whole world is ending because you have to see so many the misery and difficulties and hardships.
Mm.
But nonetheless, what inspired me to come back to school is that a lot of people came for help and guidance, and I really just did not have the answers. Like for instance, family would come and sort of wondered, say, how much they should teach their children their heritage culture, and
Mhm.
then how much they need to become, say, quote unquote, American. And some of the families would use, say, disciplinary practices that are perceived as child abuse here, like,
Mm.
hitting and beating and slapping. And they just didn't know how to manage their kids who seem to be rapidly Americanized and talking back. And then people just couldn't tell what is being assertive versus like, disrespectful.
Mhm.
And then like what's the right way to say raise girls properly, quote unquote, restrictions on the girls. And then, but then they want their children to do really well. And then when they want them to do well, when they go to school and things, the girls as well as boys are learning to be assertive and independent and, confident, and many of the behaviors they learn at school would not sit well. Or whatever they were told to be a good kid at home, those behaviors just do not work well outside. Say, for instance, among Asian families, the kids, if they, when they're getting reprimanded, if they look straight to parents' eyes, they're told, keep your head down.
Mm.
You're being disrespectful. And then they go to school, and then when they talk to teachers to explain whatever happened, if they avoid eye contact, then the teachers are accusing them of like you're not being honest,
Right.
and so the kids are getting all like conflicting messages. The kids do not know what to do. And then, adolescence is a hard time, especially middle school. So kids start to behave bad or acting up, and then parents did not know what to do. And, I quickly, of course, reach out to books because that's what
Mhm.
I do, I guess. And all of them were written for sort of the mainstream families,
Mhm.
and none of them really seemed to really work or applicable. They didn't really seem to they account for the difference in the cultures. were dynamic changes in the culture in the family and across generations. So I was more of like, I don't know what to do kind of thing. So after some years of working in the field, I felt I just need to go back and figure really this one out. So
Mhm.
that sort of motivated me back to go back to school. But then I was really coming for academic interest anyway. So it was more like it's about time for me to go back. So that's why I went
Gotcha.
back to school. And those experiences, now I tell all my students, if at all possible, go work in the field. There's a lot that you learn from books
Mhm.
and school, but there's so much more that you can learn from the world. And especially, if you are in school social work, you got to know what it's like to be one and what's the challenges and what's the sort of rewarding as well as like, really hard things that you have to face.
Yeah. How do you think that experience has made you, a better academic and a better researcher?
I mean, and fundamentally, I think the questions came from my practice experience.
Mhm.
And whatever I do, I do think about all the families that I have met and all the sort of the complex dynamics that might not be captured in many of the great books. And over the years, it's not just that I've been just, ever since I left the field, I'm just at the school. I've been keeping close contact with the communities and I would go. And one of my sort of, research design includes talking to parents. So like through focus groups and, with the parents as well as the young people. And, even after 10, 20 years, some of the struggles remain the same. So I don't know whether that's to be happy about or not.
Yeah.
But sort of to be continually confirmed and validated that what I'm trying to get at is really important and still relevant. And
Yeah.
then their struggles remain. So there's sort of the constant loop, if you will, that I sort of wanted to keep sort of alive. My research should be alive and relevant to the people that I'm studying. But there has been a lot of sort of back and forth exchanges.
Gotcha. And I just want to go back again a little bit into your biography and your earlier years, because I mean, I understand that
Hmm.
your background wasn't necessarily the typical one for a lot of American academics, right? Can you talk a little bit about,
Right.
yeah, your early life and I don't know how you think it may have prepared you for this kind of work or not? I don't know.
Right. So not just that I'm atypical here, but I think I'm also even atypical among the people of the same background, like same nationality, and
Mhm.
because many of the people who do come to the states to study, not all, of course, but tend to be sort of coming from relatively well-off family who can afford sending their kids away. And my case, like it was almost a miracle that even I went to college with the means that my family had. But so there's a lot of sort of unusual pathways that I have taken, and I wasn't a like really like bookish kid either.
Mhm.
I was more into like painting, drawing, that sort of thing. But my family was really poor, and we moved quite a bit. And I mean, I drew because I could not afford even the basic material that I needed to draw. I pretty much used anything and everything. Say, scrap papers, the back of the calendar
Mhm.
to draw. And then, I wasn't sure whether I have a future in like in art. It's at least in Korea, the art schools were very expensive and materials were really expensive and kids with extra lessons and classes and tutoring and whatnot will be able to go, not someone like me kind of. So that was not what I could really imagine doing. And then, even if you're not poor, I think I grew up during the era where the girls had a lot of inhibitions and restrictions.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of you should do this or you can't do that. And most of us were even told that we need to go to good college to become a good wife. So that's quite different than
Yeah.
even the women in Korea nowadays. And that's only like, 40 years ago. But things have changed quite rapidly. So there's a lot of these. And I think I was just very curious about, or even perplexed, how things that are being taught at school and then what's actually happening in the world is so inconsistent. Like, people say, well, occupations are all should be treated equal with respect. And like I remember on a one of the school exams, we were taking many, many, many exams weekly, if not, daily. One of the question was like, true or false, whether all the occupation are equal.
Hmm.
And I said false. And then I got it, like it was checked wrong. So I actually brought it to teacher. Like it says all occupations are equal. And the teacher said that should be. I said maybe that should be, but that is not the case. It's stated as that all occupations are equal. They're not equal. People are not treated equally based on what they do. And so, I
Yeah.
mean, I was like a very little kid, like 8 or 9. And so I think those things were very perplexing.
Yeah.
And, people were treated very differently depending on how much money they have or how much money they seem to have.
Mhm.
So I think all these life experiences might have made me like more keen, if you will, to social issues like
Yeah.
economic and social and gender. And also, I grew up while the Korea was under military dictatorships. So that was a tough time. And, it was not uncommon to see or hear, say, dissenters or those opposed get arrested or jailed. And there's just so much of injustice, unfairness, and tactics and tortures and oppression.
Mhm.
I mean, I didn't know all of them, all of them. I wasn't aware. But then, like, some I could. And over the years in college, especially, we became more aware. But what was amazing was in my college years, after so many years of people's protest, resistance, and activism, and we were able to bring out first free election, and it was like the huge democratization and the massive student and civilian protest, and that was like sort of the high moment, I guess, that I became much more confident about social changes, that we can actually make this happen. And I thought maybe I can make this happen. Maybe
Yeah.
I can make the world a better place. So all these together, I think, I came to the stage that I said, something about like making the world a better place or make for the, vulnerable population's life better. And I thought social work is the answer. So all these together, I think I became sort of interested, and that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years.
All right. Well, yeah, let's talk a little bit about that work. I mean, you described a little bit about your research, and I was really struck by how many families you said you were tracking and how long you've been doing it. But can you tell us a little bit more about what kind of questions you're looking into? And what are you learning or what do you hope to learn from this research?
So one of the things was the Asian American as a group report really high rate of mental distress. We were talking about depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem, and and in fact, young Asian Americans between 15 and 24 years old report suicide as a leading cause of death, and
Mm.
that's the only racial group in the states. And this is like all the data that I learned after I came back to school. But in the field, it was just the families were struggling, kids were struggling. It was really hard. And then what's funny was, it's not, I guess, funny, but Asian Americans are
Yeah.
perceived as like, oh, model minority. They made it. They're doing really well and they don't
Hmm.
have problems. And then I'm like, they do. They have serious problems. And it was almost like ironical that, I see people struggling this much and then like people saying they're doing really well. And I wasn't sure it was just my experience. So just looking at all those data, so coming back to school, I started to look at the data and it was very sort of affirming. Like, what I see was not a fraction of small population that was vulnerable, but it was more the general trend in the States. And it has gotten worse. So over the years, I mean, this current study started in 2014, but I had a couple of other studies prior just to confirm the rates of problems. And what I have realized, the sort of the true sources of the problem. And one is in the family, and one is sort of the outside of the family. It's not one, but one cluster, two clusters. So one is the family. That's where many of the cultural discord occurs. As I said earlier, the parents sort of hang on to their culture of origin. And, studies have shown that immigrant families tend to hang on to their culture of origin because they're afraid of this sort of external forces that are sort of the threatening, right? Because they don't know. And so then they hang on to their culture of origin even more. So they're almost antique. So I actually have data that I have compared. I collected some data in Korea too to compare, and Korean Americans are much more traditional than Koreans in Korea. So that really shows that they are really, really hanging on to the old sort of values and tradition. The thing is that children are growing up here, American. So there is a generational gap, but culture gap in the family is quite significant. And, I think in recent decades, people talk about how great it is who have biculturalism, so to speak, right?
Mhm.
Like can speak multiple languages, and that's all cool. But when it comes down to culture values, there's some clashes. That there's some inconsistent for the values outside and in the family, and families emphasize like really old-fashioned values that may not even fly, say, in the country of origin, but
Right.
immigrant families really, really emphasize. And then kids, on the other hand, are living in a very Western society. So I've been trying to figure out what will be the right sort of the hybrid culture because things change, culture changes. And so I'm trying to find a way to encourage families to change the culture of origin or sort of adapt new ones, but in a way that's most beneficial for all. And that's my study that I'm trying to figure out, okay, is there a good sort of tradition to preserve? And is there bad things that we need to really like, shed or get
Mm.
rid of? So
Yeah.
that's one of the big part of the study. And so the second cluster is like, you know, the modern minority stereotype, I can go on about like, how damaging it is as much as it sounds positive, but also the racial discrimination. I think COVID-19 the pandemic has brought out all kinds of prejudice and discrimination on Asian Americans. And even prior to this, often Asian American kids were exposed to high rates of microaggressions, and they actually report the highest level of peer harassment in school, both by the majority kids as well as other minority kids. So I felt that, these young people are faced with sort of the predicament, a predicament inside and outside of the family.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been asking my participants, how they're doing, their mental health and physical health and their relationship with the parents and friends. And then also ask the parents, what do you do? Like, how do you raise your kids? That sort of thing. So that's what's been asking, what I've been asking.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I feel like mental health is like such a personal and oftentimes individualized thing, but you're talking about families and even communities, it sounds like, and their relationship to their traditions and how that affects individuals' mental health, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah.
And I wanted to, one thing that we've been asking everyone is just what are some fun parts of your job and what parts are maybe not so fun?
Fun part, really like when I got okay, so maybe I can start with the bad part. So getting the funding is really hard. I think getting funding to do research is really difficult for all around. But, because people think that Asian Americans are doing really well
Mm.
or that they are, say, quote unquote, model minority, it's really hard to convince funders to give me the money that I need.
Yeah.
So, like, if you look at NIH funding, which I've been really, fortunate enough to get a few of them, they have for the last 20 decades, if not 30, I think I think since 1998, the funding from NIH, the proportion that has supported any study that have either Asian as the main focus or made one of the subgroups, like major subgroups, the proportion was 0.17%.
Mm. Wow.
not even a percent.
Wow.
So it's not even dismal. This is like a pathetic. So a lot of folks who wanted to study Asian Americans give up because they can't move on in their career because they just can't get the funding.
Yeah.
So fortunately, I was able to get the funding. So I feel very good about it. But then when you get the funding, and then that's like the real work begins.
Right.
You need to convince families to participate in your work. And, it turns out I've been extremely successful in convincing families because I think I can really, I tell them what I do. Often many people can relate to me
Right.
or relate to what I study. It's about their life, it's about their kids. So at first, I thought like recruitment is extremely hard, but relatively speaking, I still have had great success in recruiting. Retention has been really excellent too. So after 8 years, I still have nearly 78% of the original samples in my work, and the people who have contact, that's even greater. So anyway, so those are sort of the fun and hard part, and the most rewarding part is actually generating the results that I can actually use and share with the families. So after all these years, finally, I tell and share with the families and the community that, say, gendered process, like for instance, discriminating girls in the family.
Mhm.
So it's no longer my opinion or my family's perspective,
Right.
but the data, like based on like about 1,600 people, like 800 families, about half kids and half children. I mean, no, half parents. So about 1,600 people are telling me that these gendered process or gender socialization is harmful, not just for the girl, but also for the boys in the family.
Mhm.
So these things I'm so excited to share with the family. So instead of saying, this is what I think, I say, my data shows these are harmful things, so we should really get rid of it. And then another thing is, families been struggling with sort of how they express their affection to their kids. They, in the Western culture, it's about like, hugging them, kissing them, saying I love you, or all those. And I always tell people that how much I was shocked when I first came to the States that people will hung up the phone by saying I love you or like love ya. I'm like, whoa, what can they say? Such a loaded sort of the statement, like just like bye, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, at least from where I'm from, sort of I love you was like so loaded statement, so people weren't saying it as much.
Not a
Maybe they
casual
should have.
remark. Yeah. Right.
Not as a casual remark, and especially from parents to children, it just didn't happen. I never heard my parents saying it. But it wasn't that they didn't love me. They just don't, that's not how they express. So
Right.
here it's much more physical, verbal, and, sort of explicit. And then, most of non white cultures tend not to be explicit. And most of the time it's more implicit, like, very indirect. They will say they work 3 jobs for the kids. That's how they express their love. Or
Right.
they cook the kids' favorite food, and that's how they express their love. So parents are like all struggling. They love their kids, but they can't say, and the kids sort of think that the parents love them, but
Mm.
then like they just feel like they don't know either. So now I can tell with the data to the parents that it is fine to be implicit. Often kids do know they love you, but it really helps if you say it too.
Yeah.
So if you can express it, if you can hug them one more time,
Yeah.
or give them praises, or just say that how their kids mean to them, it really helps. So it's
Yeah.
okay to keep the tradition. Actually, that tradition is a great thing. Kids really appreciate it. It runs deep and it has a very lasting impact. But it really is even way more beneficial if you can say it too. So these are very exciting findings, and I love sharing them with the parent with confidence based on over 800 family dynamics.
Yeah. You've got the data
Yeah,
to prove
I got the data.
it.
And I think I do wanted to say people that who wanted to pursue a discipline or
Mhm.
so the line of work that people will say that may not be lucrative or it may not be easy or whatever. I think, it's okay. Just be brave and bold. You want to take risks. And, life is too short to sort of stay on the safest course of actions. And I think passion and commitment does pay off. That's, I guess, what I want to say.
Thank you, Professor Choi, for your time today. And course takers, if you enjoyed listening to today's interview, please check out the others. Leave us a comment, subscribe, follow, and share this episode with your friends and family. You can find out more about the University of Chicago through uchicago.edu or the university's campus in Hong Kong through uchicago.hk. Stay tuned for more. We'll see you around.